In this video, we're going to look at how you can create a testing coverage plan using Microsoft Excel. First thing, we would want to understand what testing coverage is, and we need to, as a tester, a little bit better understand the structure of the mobile application. So if we look at the mobile application, typical mobile application structure could be defined as the multi-layer application which has multiple components. So we have individual user typically only connecting and talking to UI components and presentation logic components. We have multiple layers, and this is presentation layer. This is where the UI and presentation logic components are. There's also business layer, right? This is where application facade is, with the business workflow, business components, and business entities. And the data layer as well, where data access components are, data helper utilities, and service agents. In addition to this, we have local data and cache, right? And then we have data synchronization, which might be needed with some other services. For example, if let's assume that application is dealing with services such as Dropbox, you may want to keep a local copy of the file, and it should be current, and we want to keep the file at the Dropbox. And if Dropbox files get updated, we would want to synchronize and get it to our mobile client. And the opposite is true. If user updates the file, then we want to synchronize it and push it to Dropbox. There might be some additional services over unreliable network, and some other things to consider, like security, configuration, communication, and connectivity. So all of this needs to be considered when we're building test cases for mobile application, right? This could be web-based application, because the UI components might be built for the browser on the web server and accessed from the mobile device's browser. For iOS, this would be Safari. For Google Android would be another browser. For Microsoft platform, another browser. Probably should be built to be able to access it using PC, Mac, and Linux platforms as well. So all of these things would need to be considered when we're building a test coverage plan. So how can we build test coverage plan using Microsoft Excel? One of the best options to have is really to define all the test cases, put them in Excel spreadsheet, and define multiple iterations of how we're going to be testing. And with that, we need to cover a little bit of concept of iteration, which represents the number of test cases that we're going to execute during particular cycle. So let's start building it, and I'll explain the concept a little bit later as we go into this. So the first column I would like to do is test case ID. Next column would be test case name. Then we will have test iteration 1, and I'm just gonna copy it and make it let's assume that we have 7 iterations, which is not unusual for the complex application. Alright, so I've just copied it, and now we can change the number. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we will have a test iteration 7. Once we covered all the iteration, we would want to add another column called comments. So we'll take care of formatting real quick. Using features of Excel, we'll typically like to do it bold and then just use a color, and then we will add a all-way grid so we can see all the information here. Now, test case ID is typically a small column, but test case itself is the descriptive column, so we probably want to make it a little bit larger. So with this in mind, let's say that we have UI test case, and this would be UI 1.1, right? And test case name would be validate user a login into the application. Then we will have UI test 1.2, and here what we're going to do is we're going to validate change user password, and then we'll do UI 1.3, and this is where we're gonna change user profile settings. So 3 UI cases. Now let's do application functionality testing. Let's assume this is the claim entry application where user is allowed to enter the information for the medical claim on the mobile device to initiate the claim based on the receipts. So user can scan the copies of the receipts they received in the medical office, and they photograph them, attach them, and create a new claim. So the business layer, we can say that this is claim, and this would be test case 1.1, and the claim would be create new claim. Then claim 1.2 would be take a photograph of the receipt. Claim 1.3 might be where we trim the photograph of the receipt to make sure we only include the information that's needed for insurance company. And then test case 1.4 would be enter supporting data for the claim. And claim 1.5 would be submit claim for processing. So what we've done, we've created 2 different categories here, and what you can do sometimes, what works effectively, you can highlight them in a different colors, right? And as you add more categories, which I'm not going to do, I'm just going to leave this at number 10. So we'll have 8 different test cases. We're just going to talk about how we can create a coverage plan. So let's say that we only have 2 test resources, and this is Jason Smith, and this is Rose Johnson. So we have 2 different testers, and what we are going to plan on doing is, in the first, we're going to put a name of the tester who is going to be executing which iteration. There are multiple different approaches how you can approach this. You can say, okay, for UI test, let's have one user do it, and we say it's a Jason Smith. And for test case claim, we can just do another person, Rose Johnson. That's one way of doing it. Then you realize that for the first iteration, most likely they will not be able to complete all of this, so you can say, okay, we will only be able to cover validate user login in the first iteration and create new claim and take a photograph, because this is the speed with which developers are going to do it. So here we're going to just say not covered, or you can say none, whatever, or not tested, whatever you want to say, whatever works for your organization. And then what you will do in the next iteration, we can expand it, because if we tested it in the first iteration, we probably would want to do it in the other iterations as well. And here we need to decide if we want to include test phase 2 here or not, and here for test phase 3. And then we build a coverage plan of how we would like to execute it to make sure everything is done correctly. And then here, I'm gonna do it like this, and like this, and then finally we will cover all the scenarios. And here we're also going to do it like this. So this would be our test plan, and the rest of them would be none. Sometimes you don't even want to populate it With wording, you may want to just choose, okay, I am not doing anything, so I'm just going to highlight it in red. And then I'm just going to close this, restore the borders. So what we see here, it's the test coverage plan, and this plan shows what are the test scenarios and test cases that's going to be executed, and what are the resources that's assigned to this. Obviously, this is pretty simplistic. We only have two very relatively simple test cases, but in the case where you have potentially multiple use cases or multiple functionalities, this becomes very handy because you may have 200, 300 rows, and deciding which test cases you want to give a priority, coordinating with developers, telling them, okay, what's going to be ready for test iteration 1, 2, and 3 becomes important. And this is where you would want to keep comments. For example, you might say that submit claim will only be functional for iteration 6, right? So this is something, the information that you received from the developer, and you want to keep it in the comments section. This is the valid, valuable comment that will help you do planning. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next episode, in my next video. Thank you very much.